I'm not sure what to say at this point. It kind of feels like we're starting to repeat ourselves a little bit on the Sunday No Huddle. I'm Andy Olson, joined by IlliniBoard.com's Robert Rosenthal. Roberts, Illinois falls 20-7 to Nebraska. Your first thoughts about what is another Big Ten loss on the season, and they fall to 2-4 on the season.
I mean, my first thought is the same first thought I've had the last 2 weeks while standing here talking to you. Yards and no points. You know, this was 310 yards and 7 points. And if you think about what that is, if you think about look at a football field. Think about a team going 300 yards but only getting 7 points out of the deal. There have to be so many mistakes. There have to be so many failed fourth downs, missed field goals, turnovers. Like, to make that happen, you have to make about 7, 8, 9 mistakes, and they made those 7, 8, 9 mistakes and ended up with 7 points. So, you know, I feel like a broken record, but it's yards and no points.
All right, let's hear what you think about what Brett Bielema said post-game, because he was particularly fiery, even if you haven't heard at home the full thing yet. I feel like you've seen the quotes. If you're an Illini fan, you've read them all, because I feel like is extremely unhappy with where it was. Going as far to say this is as infuriated as he's been in his 15 years of head coaching. Now, maybe some of that is a little bit of the recency bias, but I think that still holds some weight when he says that, with Illinois' inability to do some of these things and the way they keep making these mistakes, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about what he has seen and where he has been, he had those rough years at Arkansas, although they did go to 3 bowls in 5 years. But the first year and the last year were struggles at Arkansas. Before that at Wisconsin, you know, he focused in on the ability to get a foot, basically. The ability to get 1 yard when you're 3rd and goal at the 1 foot long line and you don't get in either try. With something like that, he was at Wisconsin. They could always get a yard. They have those offensive lines. He was at Arkansas with teams that had, you know, a lot of offensive linemen that went to the NFL. And we've even talked about it these first 2 years with Coach Bielema. The ability to pick up 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 had changed from what it was under Lovey. And this was this thing of like, okay, 3rd and short, 4th and short isn't a concern anymore. They can get these yards, and then completely different. So I understand his disbelief at, you know, you need 1 foot in 2 plays and you can't get it. You know, and that takes 7 points off the board. It's crazy.
I know fans at home are unhappy with that offense. Of course, it's easy when you're unhappy with the product like that to go to the person who is commanding that being Barry Lunny Jr. for the Illini. And when you compare it to Tony Peterson's year, I almost said first year, his year in Champaign under Brett Bielema that got him fired, strikingly similar. I believe the team had the same 40% winning percentage. The amount of total points per game was almost the same. We see what happened with Peterson. Do you think that the way that the offense has looked, the way that just things have gone, that something similar could be said happening to Lunny this offseason, or are fans just overreacting to the recency maybe a little bit in that?
In a sense, it's 6 games, so you have to play out the next 6 games and see how this season ends to make those comparisons. If you would have, you know, after 6 games of Ryan Walters as defensive coordinator, you know, they got shut out by Wisconsin 24-0 in the 6th game there. There was a lot of concern, you know, the points they give it to Virginia and this and that. They came off that bye week that year and turned some things around. So you have to wait to see the full season to make those comparisons in my mind. But to your question, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. This issue is not the same kind of issue as 2021. 2021, I know the number off the top of my head. I think it's 319 yards a game, maybe 329. But they really struggled to move the ball. Blake Hayes had a bazillion punts in 2021. I think it was close to a Big Ten record for punts in a 9-game season or something like that. They were punting 7, 8, 9, 10s. This one is a quarterback who leads the nation in interceptions thrown. This one is you know, a team that is bottom 5 nationally in 4th down conversions. You know, this one is they are able to move the ball, but these issues of 4th and 1, these issues of converting third downs, these issues of throwing interceptions, fumbles to the other team, field position, meaning that the offense has to go 85 yards to do anything. All of those issues have compounded this to where they can't put points on the board. And even when they get in the red zone, they're not putting points on the board. So everything's not working.
You don't hide it in your coverage, Robert. Like, you are a fan.
100%.
And you write for fans. So
yes.
For you watching this team, is that inability to score the most frustrating parts of what 2023 has been so far?
I'm trying to put it in my head to not say this, but Andy, I was just sitting there nursing a Hams beer, a Hams. Andy, I went deep in the fridge for the Hams, okay? Just like I'm in that stage of like what can be, like I can't comprehend what I'm seeing. Because we've seen the pieces, we've seen the parts, we've seen these coaches do it, we've seen this offensive coordinator do it last year. We've seen yards at the end of points, we've seen them limit turnovers, play safe football. You know, Coach Bielema always says the term complementary football. You know, we've seen it and we know it's possible to not only not see it happening, but to see this team continuing just shooting themselves in the foot. The defense in the second half playing lights out. You know, the Nebraska offense keeps getting the ball at the 22 and the defense is keeping points off the board. And for the offense to not get past the 50 until like the last drive or whatever, it's hard to even it's stare off into space kind of stuff for a fan, because it's like, how is all of this stuff working? I think that's what you saw in Bielema's comments and why he's so frustrated. It's not that like, oh man, we don't even have a quarterback. Oh, there's not a linebacker who can make a tackle. Oh, you know, the pieces are there. It's just none of it is working, and that's hard to take.
Oh, for sure. And I think you bring up the defense and the way they performed in the second half. Nicario Harper had a great game. He led the team in tackles, almost had 20 of them. I think he ended up with 17. Kenena Odeluga looked really good as well. So I think it is important when we bring up the offensive struggles. The defense had a really good game yesterday as well. But we'll ask you a question now that Brett Behrens asked me, because on the 10 o'clock news, game wasn't over yet, so we were not able to show highlights. So Brett was asking me a question as we were getting towards the end of the show. He said, where does Illinois go from here? And I almost felt a little dumbfounded with that question, because when you look at the next two games, easily Illinois can be 2-6 after at Maryland and then hosting Wisconsin. So I want to ask you the same perplexing question, which is, what now for Illinois? What do you do from here in the second half of 2023?
I think you will see changes this week like you saw after the bye week in 2021. Now, they had 2 weeks to change things over. If you remember, after that bye week, so they'd lost to Wisconsin 24-0. The offense had something like 141 yards total in the entire game against the Wisconsin defense. And so they looked at everything. They told Brandon Peters they were going with Art Sikowski for the rest of the year, that he was going to be their starter for the final 5 games. They were 2-5, going nowhere, hadn't beat anyone, 20-plus point underdogs at Penn State. The defense was a struggle, and then they came out in the barge package. They came out with Sikowski running a different offense, leaning on Josh McCray in that game. Unfortunately, he's out for the season this year, but you know, they just changed some things and said, look, we've got to do things differently. They changed some stuff on defense. They had 2 weeks to do that, but that was look, I don't care if we think this is going to eventually work, or let's just keep doing it and it's going to click. We need to make some wholesale changes, and I think you're going to see that this week.
Yeah, I would be interested to see how that goes, because like you mentioned, only 1 week this time. You do have the extra day. I imagine things are very busy at the Smith Center on Saturday, and I'm sure they continue into Sunday as well as they prepare for that Maryland game. No slouches, by the way, as Maryland had a very competitive game against Ohio State. Some people say they're the 4th best team in the Big Ten. So having to get that game after the disappointment that was the Nebraska game, I think is an unfortunate part of the schedule this year for Illinois. But those changes that you talk about, we see how they were able to at least bring 2021 around to being a respectable 5-7 season in the end. I don't think Maryland is exactly like top 25 Penn State like they saw in 2021.
Right.
But I do think it's possible that there are pieces to this team where something can be changed and something can still be salvaged from this season, if that makes sense.
I definitely think it makes sense. I mean, You saw it with the defense in the second half that, like, when they get the pieces right and when they, they've been kind of waiting for this click, and maybe this second half was that. Now, Nebraska's not some high-powered offense, so it's not like that's going to be some, this was the game they turned it around. But you saw signs with the defense, and again, look at that opening drive by the offense. They go 14 plays, they go 74 yards, they march right down the field. And then they just can't punch it in. Like, what this team needs is like 2 drives to open a game where they punch it in, get some confidence, and say, hey, look at that. When we don't get a holding penalty to take a long quarterback run off and make it 1st and 20 again, when we don't throw an interception in the end zone or whatever, look at all the points on the board that happen when we don't make mistakes. They just have to get out of their own way and get to this point where they're feeling good and they can get some momentum on the offense.
All right, I'm going to go back into the encyclopedia of your mind and try and find an answer to this question. But I know that the expectations were so big this season for Illinois. Knowing what next season presents, with the way that the Big Ten is changing, with what last season was and the ability to build upon that and grow even further, it seems as though in the last 30 years, I've just seen fans say that this is typical Illinois football to have these expectations. You're coming off a bowl game and then to collapse in this way. For you, is this the worst you've seen? Are there far more like in, 2008 or something like that? Or like, for you, where does this rank as far as expectation versus what the actual product has been on the field for a season?
The worst we've seen, I think, by far, was 2001, followed by 02 and 03. 02 was just a 5-7 season. Had they beat San Jose State, they would have been 6-6 and gone to a bowl. But, after you win the Big Ten, like a Big Ten solo title, the last Illinois solo title, to then go 5-7 and then 1-11, that was a complete collapse. So that's the worst that comes to mind. There was a similar collapse after 07, again 5-7 the next year, and then 3-9 in 2009. So it was 2 years stepping back. I don't have that sense right now because, again, some of those seasons, like if you were watching the defense in the opener in 2003, where they gave up a player named Dwayne Smith, had transferred out of Illinois, went to Illinois State, puts up 268 receiving yards in the first game against the Illinois defense. And it was like, if that guy's going to put up 268 yards, everybody's going to put up yards this year. And that's how the game went, or that's how the season went, and they went 1-11. So those were, oh my gosh, Illinois can't stop anybody. Oh my gosh, Illinois can't even move the ball. I don't see that so far. It could still fall apart. We got 6 games to go. We'll see. I don't see that yet, so I don't think this is, but this is probably the most confounding because you won 9. Coach Bielema went 9-9 the first 2 years in the Big Ten. You start 0-3 the next year in the third year, and you're thinking, if they go 3-6, 2-7 in the Big Ten, that's a huge step back from winning 4 or 5 games in the Big Ten. So that's what's in the balance here of these last 6 games.
Robert, I always enjoy these conversations on the Sunday No Huddle. Hopefully they're a little therapeutic for you as well after games.
Let's hope after what I've been doing all day of staring off into space. So.
All right. Well, hopefully next week you won't have to dig deep into the fridge once more.
Okay. Let's hope not.
Hams, but
let's hope not.
We'll talk again next Sunday.
All right. You got it. Thanks.